Okay, so welcome. Our technical session for the afternoon is going to be T-11. And we are going to be talking about power supplies. Anybody want to tell me what symptoms would make us want to open up a power supply and perform repairs?
Unless you want to get electrocuted.
I'm about to say none.
None. Okay,
Yeah,
there
that's
you
a
go.
field
None.
replaceable unit right there, dog.
Field replaceable unit. Man, we're ahead of the game today. So field replaceable unit, we never open it up. Why? If we are not trained electricians, we can get seriously hurt and or unalived. Not a very good prospect. So kind of leave it alone. Leave it to the people who specialize in this and just replace the unit. Take the safe route. So for this particular technical session, we're going to be talking about identifying some characteristics of power supplies and their connectors. So we get to start our journey down the peripheral and connector path. There is way more than you would have thought necessary. Don't worry. We have a way for you to practice. We're going to be talking about selecting power supplies based on given specifications and describe how to remove and install a power supply, identify some of the common problems. Power supplies tend to fail in one of two ways. Unfortunately, it's either completely catastrophic shutdown or intermittent problems. Intermittent power supply issues can be some of the most difficult for a tech to troubleshoot, especially early on in their career, because the problems don't present in the same places all the time. So it's a little tricky. And as always, we want to keep our BSMs in mind. Just like this morning, we want to maintain a growth mindset, remembering that our intelligence is not fixed, can be changed and developed over time. We can learn new skills. We can develop whole new career paths and pathways in our brains. And also communication. Had pretty fun exercises last week with communication. And in communication, we have to think a lot about language. As an IT professional, you'll start to learn that you have basically 3 different ways of communicating with people. You'll have the way that you communicate with customers, which is going to be non-technical usually. And then you're also going to have a way that you communicate with coworkers, which is going to tend to be highly technical. And you're not going to have to explain everything because they already know a lot of this stuff. So conversations become more direct, much shorter. You can explain issues in a very concise manner. And then there's going to be a third way, which is generally how we would communicate with our managers and officers in our company, who may or may not have technical skill, but their concern is going to be more about the management of resources, not necessarily about the minutia of day-to-day activities. So 3 main ways we will talk to people and communicate in our day-to-day activities as an IT professional. All right. Going back to this from our first technical session, just kind of understanding electricity. What is it? Why is it important to our lives? Why does it make my fingers tingle when I touch a live wire? So, electricity essentially is a flow of negatively charged particles called electrons moving through a copper medium, typically, sometimes aluminum. The pressure of the electrons in the wire is called voltage, and it's measured in volts, obviously. The amount of electrons on a wire is called current, and that's measured in amperes. And then the amount of electrical power called wattage. So kind of a way I was taught to think about this was almost like plumbing. So if you think about voltage as water moving through a pipe, and then amps as the diameter of the pipe. And then your wattage would be like the electrical power or pressure on the other side. So you think about, you know, a lower amperage being a wider diameter pipe. If you're pushing a lot of, you know, water through a wider diameter pipe, it's just kind of going to ooze out the other side. It's not really going to do much. But if you tighten up that diameter and continue pushing the same amount of water through it, you're going to have high pressure, high wattage. And so the amperage provides that pressure. And that's the dangerous part. Voltage, not so much. Amperage is where we see the danger. Now, wires, depending on the medium, will have a level of resistance to the flow of electrons, like how hard it would be able to push current through them. And that resistance is measured in ohms. Do we need to be experts at this? No. Just have a basic understanding of it. Now, electricity tends to flow in two different ways. You have what's called AC or alternating current, or DC, which is direct current. So when it goes from the power station, it travels on what's called alternating current. And it travels out on a hot line, returns on a neutral line, and the neutral line essentially is grounded to prevent an uncontrolled short or surge in electricity. And then when it gets to the transformer outside your house, it converts to direct current. And that goes into your breaker box inside your house. And then from there, it goes to alternating current, which goes to our plugs. And most of our electrical items need that, except for the items inside of our computer, which require direct current, which is what our power supply does. It converts that AC to DC. And we talked about last week, standard in the US, somewhere between 110 to 120. Some people tend to say 115. Some people just say 110. Europe uses somewhere between 220 and 240. And most other places in the world the same. We looked at this picture on day 2 or 3. Again, I hate this piece of it. So, powers all components, converts alternating current to direct current. They have the selector switch or the automatic switching on the back, which we have a better picture of that coming up here in a moment. And then they operate off of the 5 different voltages, as we've talked about before. You have positive 3.3, positive and negative 5, positive and negative 12. And then it provides DC connectors for inside the computer, which we will get into momentarily. And the capacity that a power supply has is measured in watts or wattage. And watts essentially are amps times volts. Questions so far? All right. So here is kind of the inside, just a rough drawing or a logical drawing of the inside of a power supply, where you have the power coming in, breaks it out into those various voltages for us to use, and then goes out on some form of connector. And they tend to operate on what are called 12-volt rails. I think in the last 15 years, we've started seeing the rise of multi-rail power supplies that can push a lot more wattage and power a lot more items in our computers than was typically needed or even thought of back in the early 2000s. Here's what it looks like with the cover off. And you can see these big battery looking things that are soldered down to the board. Anybody remember what those are called?
Capacitors.
Capacitors. That is where the electricity is stored when the power is off. So, and also the dangerous portion of the computer. If you see one of these on your motherboard and it looks swollen and or cracked, Motherboard is now paperweight because you have a blown capacitor. So that's something that you can almost visually see a lot of the time. Now, there are some power supplies out there that are single voltage. So they're either 110 or they're 220. But it is more common that you would have a power supply with dual voltage. And they have a selector switch on the back. It's a little red switch. You can even see this in test out if you zoom in on the back of your power supply. And you can select either 220 or 110, depending on which market you're in. More modern power supplies are starting to do this automatically. They have an auto switching function. So it basically, once it receives voltage from the wall, it knows what it's getting. It knows whether it's 220 or 110, and it'll switch to accommodate for that. It's dummy proof almost, or error proof for the most part. You know, with the red switch, humans are human, especially if you travel internationally and you bring your computer with you at some point. You run the risk of, if I take my computer here over to Europe, I plug it in over there, and they have 220 out of the wall, I can fry my electronics. I bring a computer from Europe to here, plug a 220 into a 110, it won't have enough power for what it needs to do, and it may not even turn on. That's the best case. The other way, that's a big frowny face. You know, that may be new computer time, and we don't want that. So, also on the back, it's a little clear to see that selector switch right here, little red switch. We also have a physical switch to turn on and off the power supply. This would be a hard kill. When you press the button on your tower, if anybody ever noticed, they have to press and hold it for like 3 or 4 seconds to turn it off. You're doing like a hard reboot. Okay, well, that's what's called soft power. So when you do that and you're holding that power button down, the system is running around shutting everything down, knowing that you want to turn off. And it's like, quick, 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 turn everything off so that, you know, we're about to turn off, And that way everything can, all the processes can end, everything can shut off and be ready to turn off and not damage the system. The switch on the back is a hard kill. There is no delay. It kills the power. And so if you have a system on and running, you can damage the system by shutting down the system in that manner. But essentially, soft power gives you a variety of options. You can turn on the system. You can make the system hibernate. You can put it into a sleep function. You can do the delayed power off. All of these can actually be established in your power settings, what you want it to do and when. So that's soft power. Any questions here? Pretty straightforward. No? All right. Now we need to talk about cables and connectors. So we saw on last week when we were talking about motherboards, we briefly mentioned the 20+4 pin. Here you can see it. You have a 20 pin set and then a 4-pin set that clips onto it. This is for a variety of reasons. One being, like we talked about this morning, manufacturers don't like running multiple lines. So if they can utilize adapters or modifications to make it so that a single piece works for multiple boards, better for them. So the 20+4s can serve multiple purposes. It can go into a 24 pin. It can go into a 20 pin. And if it goes into the 20 pin, this 4-pin here can also be used to power the CPU. Because more often the CPU needs its own power supply, own power hookup. The 20+4 provides the 5 different voltages that we were talking about earlier. And the CPU connectors typically are 4, but more and more we're seeing 6 or 8 as processors are becoming more powerful and they have higher power requirements. So you got your 20 plus 4, and then your distinct CPU power. All right, next. You got your 4-pin Molex here. Yeah, 4-pin Molex. Typically used for hard drives, optical drives, floppy drives, things like that. Some of the older ones pre-SATA. So this provides the power, not a data connection. This is strictly power. Understood, Ravensley. And then next to that, we have the 4-pin Mini, which the 4-pin Mini can be used for fans, 3.5 floppy drives, things of that nature. And this is basically, it's very similar to the one we have up here. It's just a much smaller form factor, otherwise known as shape and size. Questions on this one? We feel good about it. We are one with the Molex. All right. Moving on a little bit, we have a PCIe connector, which can be this 6 or 8 pin right here. This is for your GPUs and additional resources that are going to need direct power. And then we have the newer version of that 4-pin Molex when we upgraded to the SATA drives above the PATAs. So we utilize this connection form right here. Hard to see. It does still have that L-shaped connector that we associate with the SATA drives or the SATA connectors. It's just a little bit longer form of it. And it's a little bit harder to see. I don't know if you can see. You can see a little notch in the end over here. So you have a little bit of an L-shaped connection. It's more prominent when you look at the back of a drive. All right. Are we good with these two?
I hope so.
You hope so?
Feel like might be identifying some or something.
Maybe. All right. Connectors and pinouts. So basically in enterprise settings and normal standard computers, the colors of the wires are not random. They actually serve a purpose. So your blacks are the grounds, your oranges are your 3.3s, your reds are the positive 5s, whites are negative 5s, and so on and so on. 12 positive is yellow, 12 negative is blue. This makes it easy to locate what pins require what. If you're using a multimeter, you should know what you're expecting. And many of you are looking at this graph going, do we really have to memorize this?
I'm hoping not.
No, you do not need to memorize this. This is a good idea to understand, just be able to read a schematic, know what you're looking at, and Google your pinouts. If you're using a multimeter and you're not lucky enough to have a power supply tester on hand and you have to use a multimeter so you know what voltages are coming out and what should be coming out. So that's the main thing to take away from this. And to understand that the wire colors actually do serve a purpose. Although if you're dealing with gaming computers and stuff like that, for aesthetic reasons, all the wires will be the same color. They'll be like purple or white or black or red or something like that to match the theme of whatever they're going for their systems. All right, form factor. As we have stated a couple times, all that is just a fancy way of saying shape and size. So the form factor of your case will determine the size and placement of your power supply in your tower. So for the purposes of this, we're talking about a tower. ATX boards, they give you standard measurements for the desktop PCU, and they come with a P1 connector, analog, Molex, SATA, all that fun stuff. Mini ATX, smaller power supplies are designed for these because they have a lot less power requirements, and they also cannot be as expanded as much. All right, talked about this earlier, rails. So generated power supplies split into pretty much 3 primary rails. You have your 12, 5, and 3, and each rail has a maximum amount of power it can supply. And more modern upgrades like CPUs and GPUs and stuff like that require more power than the original rails could provide. So then we started seeing multi-rail systems come up. So you would have a power supply that can run 3 or 5 or whatever 12-volt rails. And you have the option of the single and the multi-rail, but depending on what you're building and what you're needing it for, you may want to invest in the multi-rail. All right, so each power supply has a wattage rating. How much can it put out? And we need to think to ourselves, like, how do we know how much we're going to need? Well, if you're building a system, then you would need to basically take all the components you're going to be putting it in, look at its power requirements in watts, add up all those watts, and then for CompTIA's purposes, they say add 20%, but for real life, you probably want to add 50 just to get a good lifespan out of your power supply. You never want to be in a case where you just buy just enough to cover what you have, because any additions you make will automatically not have the power to run. So yep, they do have power supply calculators if you wish. So that's the general rule. CompTIA, oh, I guess they say 30%. I thought CompTIA was 20, but 30% for CompTIA, 50% for real life. So for the exam, 30, for real life, 50. There are going to be some deviations as we go through this. Most PSUs now are modular. So what that basically means is the wires that are in the inside can be clipped out, the housings, and then you can put other ones in to fit your needs. Why do they do this? It's less manufacturing. They don't have to manufacture multiple power supplies with multiple different types of connectors. They can have housings that are removable and interchangeable, allowing them to have the greatest market for each power supply that they're creating. Uh-oh. Arthur, can you please tell us number 1?
Number 1, is that a 4-pin fan connector?
Good guess. It is a 4-pin, but it's a little big for a fan connector.
Sorry, I don't know then.
Okay. Madisur? Or Mudasar?
Is it for Molex or hard disk?
That is a 4-pin Molex used for hard drive or disk drives, optical drives, things like that. Pause power. Nice. All right, next. Did you have a question, Joseph?
No, well, I kind of wanted to. I knew what the first one was, so now I'm hoping you don't ask me what the second one is.
Well, while we're here, give it a shot. It's a little boxy.
And that's what, that would maybe we think, I thought that would have been the optical, that would have had some type of optical thing because of that boxy. You know, I'm not gonna waste your time. That one I don't know.
You're right. All right. Tavana, can you tell us number 2?
Fan.
It is a 4-pin, which fans are typically 4-pin, but it's more of a boxy shape rather than a straight line, right? Good guess, though. So we got here. Gavin. Any ideas on number 2?
CPU power.
It absolutely is CPU power. Very good. Awesome. Number 3. Amelia.
I guess another one.
Yeah, number 3. It's kind of an unfair one. So you can probably count the wires going into it.
Ooh, but 6.
6-pin Molex. It's not one we showed in the previous slides. So why don't you give us number 4 then? It's kind of like number 1, but it's much smaller.
Damn. Me or
I feel like you're hot on the trail of the what it's used for. You're getting some help in chat, Amelia.
I see mini.
Yeah.
Fan connector.
It's mini 4-pin for fans. There you go. Again, it's first exposure. Let's see here. Becklet. Can you please tell us number 5? That big connector right there.
Number 5.
It's like
Is
it's for
that
something important.
I'm sorry.
So it looks like it's for something important.
I would say the power to the motherboard, the 20 plus 4, or maybe 20 for this one. So the power motherboard.
Yeah, that is the P1 power connector. 20 or 20 plus 4 would be acceptable.
Thank you.
Very good. Last one, number 6. Oh. Bashan. It's number 6. It's got that funny kind of L-shaped.
I'm guessing it's a SATA cable.
Should have dropped the guess, man. It is a SATA connector. More confidence. Very good. Very good. Yes, that is the SATA power connector. All right. So here we go.
What you said number 3 was?
That's
Number
what I'm
3,
trying to figure out.
6-pin
Oh, it's a
auxiliary.
6-pin. Oh.
Yeah. Now, we're going to get into powers and connectors or cables and connectors. There's a ton of them. This is just for the power supply. Then there's ones for peripheral devices. There's ones for different types of USBs. There's different ones for different types of display devices. And we have to kind of sort all of this out. We've built study tools to kind of help you practice with these, and we'll be giving these to you guys soon. So, because some of these kind of blend together, there's a lot of them. It's kind of like acronyms. I think there's close to like 300 acronyms we have to know or something like that for this course that we have to be familiar with. And understanding the acronyms helps you answer the questions, because a lot of times if you know what the acronym means, you know what it does. Questions so far? No? I had a young lady who was sat next to me in class, and I kid you not when I say her first weekend of the class, she went through the entire book and wrote and made a flashcard for every single acronym. And then she would use that to kind of learn all the acronyms. I'm not saying that that's what you need to do. That was her method. And I thought that was a little extreme myself, but it was kind of shocked because it filled up one of these containers. She basically just filled it up with nothing but acronyms. Right. Ooh, matching game. Pause it real quick. All right, so talked about the different rails, voltages, what it takes to choose a power supply, you know, add up all the voltages we need, add 30%. Woohoo, pick our power supply off that. In real life, we know we need about 50. If it's a machine we're making, we got to do all the additions. If it's a pre-made unit, we can look and see what their specs are and build from there. So it makes it a little bit easier. Removing a power supply, similar to what we've seen before. Turn off the computer, unplug the computer. What do we do after we unplug it? It's not written here, but what do we
Hold
do?
the button for 3 to 5 seconds to depress the residual electricity.
There you go. Thank you, Eric.
I thought it
Hold
was
the
5
button
to
for
8.
3 to 5 seconds.
I thought it was 5 to 8.
Depends on what you read, but short period of time, hold the button. 3 to 5 seconds is roughly what they said. 5 to 8, some people or some documentation may say. And that dispels the residual electricity in the capacitors, making the computer safer to work on.
And sometimes you can hear it.
Boo.
Yeah, like that.
Less dramatic though. So after that, we can tie back loose hair, remove any loose jewelry, and then take off our side panel. Once the side panel's off, we can unplug the power supply lines to the motherboards, drives, connectors, all that fun stuff. Is there something you might want to do when we open it up before we start unplugging things? Anybody think of something you might want to do?
Put on an EST brush prime.
There you go, ESD
or
rinse.
ground
That's
yourself.
one. That's one thing we can do. I like that.
Ground
Anything
yourself.
else? Ground yourself. Okay.
Oh yeah, take pictures.
Right.
There you go, Justin. Nice. Why we take pictures? There's 2 main reasons.
To remember where everything goes.
That's the big one, to remember where everything goes.
And
What's another
documentation.
reason? What was that, Rashawn?
Documentation.
Documentation. What do we document?
Where everything goes. So that
Well,
way
that helps us put everything back together.
How
What if there's a lot of
I
gents
looked
on the outside of
before.
this computer?
I looked before.
so
There we
that way-
go.
Yeah.
The state it was in when we got it. You know,
Yeah,
if
because
somebody
then they
took a
could just
sledge,
blame it on you.
exactly. You don't want somebody coming in like looking like it took a sledgehammer to the computer and be like, oh no, this thing was brand new when I brought it in. I just had it detailed. You know, no, we want to make sure we take pictures of its current state, all that fun stuff, so that we are not responsible for any pre-existing damage or issues.
And people really do that. They really do.
There was like a thing with Costco. I think they've gotten rid of it, but it was like if a plant dies within like 3 to 5 months, they give you a full refund. And so what people were doing was they were returning live Christmas trees because they were a plant. So like mid-January, they're like, yeah, it died. I'm returning it per your policy.
Oh my goodness.
I think they've corrected that one though. So once we've unplugged everything, remove the power supply from the case, make sure we're unscrewing the ones that are actually holding the power supply in. We don't want to unscrew any ones that might be holding the case for the power supply together, all that fun stuff. And then we can install our brand new fancy power supply, and you follow the same steps in reverse order with the exception of pressing and holding the power supply for 5 seconds. And we're ready to go. And you may be sitting there going, man, this sounds like a lot of stuff to remember. Is there anywhere we can go and practice this stuff over and over and over and over again?
Labs.
You're in luck. Test Out has labs for you. There are some set up for tonight for just that reason. And the power supply lab is the number 2 lab that tends to get people kind of frustrated because of a very minor detail. All right.
Yeah, also for the labs, if you have one red check, does that mean you have to redo it all over or?
I would recommend doing the labs over. I mean, the labs are to help build your muscle memory.
Oh, I
It's
see.
it's not just about racing through to the end. So many of these labs you'll be doing minimum 3 to 5 times during this class because you'll do them by yourself, you'll do them, and then we'll do them in groups maybe a couple times.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
So doesn't necessarily mean you need to rush back and do it right now, but at some point, yes, you're probably going to want to go back and redo it. And some of these test out labs come up in mock exams too. So it's good to know the ins and outs of them. Just saying. All right, any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, revelations? None? That's good. It's time for another quiz. Time to climb. Do the beach this time. All right. A lot of bears in this group. Is that the first icon to come up? Gotta ask. Okay, pause recording.